instead of cheering, have it activate this. I will instead of cheering, have it activate this. I will have it. Let's have it listen for one of your emotes. What do you say?
Sure.
Okay.
Should we
So
have it listen for the boop emote?
okay, what's the text for that?
That's a good question.
So I'm going to stop this.
I have so many emotes so that I forget what. I think it should. Yeah, it's just fair boop.
Okay. So if e dot chat message dot and I need the actual text of the message, so I'll say dot message. I'm not even going to test to see if the emote's actually there. I'll just say contain.
Hey, Blazor fans, welcome to the chat room. Just giving everybody a second to join the show. Got a new chatbot, so hopefully that helps alleviate some of the chat issues we were having last week. Actually, didn't have a show last week because I was extremely busy. Just got back from the MVP summit out there in Redmond. Got to spend some time on campus with awesome folks like Scott Hunter and Daniel Roth and Steve Sanderson and talk about what's coming in the roadmap, things that we can and cannot share on the show. So it's time well spent, but it left me with catching up on sleep last Friday, so there was no show last week. So this week we have a show with lots of demos and things that I planned for last week, but didn't have time to kind of share with the audience. So with the new chatbot, this is a cloud-based one this time. I've got some preliminary commands set up so we can do things like, say, roadmap. If you want to grab a quick look at the current roadmap for Blazor, you can do things like that. So hopefully the new chatbot works out and doesn't stop people from getting links into the chat room and things they need to do. Hopefully it's more help than it is a pain. The last chatbot didn't quite work out so well, so we'll see. May have to ditch this one if it gets to be too annoying. So I've got a couple things in the news segment today. Sorry I didn't get a chance to give a proper shout out to folks on Twitter. I've got a couple articles that I wanted to share and kind of a call to action. I've got this call to action. Next week, Tuesday, April 2nd, is the Visual Studio 2019 launch event. There is a Code Party channel on Twitch for the virtual attendee party. That's going to be starting at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and I will be on that show. So I'll be on there talking about Blazor and answering some questions from the Twitch channel audience. I'll be there with Jeff Fritz, who I think is just wrapping up his show right about now. So you might have just been watching him moments ago on Twitch. So I'll be out there with Jeff and some other folks, and we're going to have a good time right there on the Channel 9 studio. So make sure you check that out. Everything starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time and doesn't wrap up until like 7 o'clock at night. So there's a full day worth of stuff. I'll be on there between 4 and 6 Pacific time, sometime in that time area. I haven't been given an exact slot, so it'll be in that time range. But it'll be all good stuff, so make sure you tune in all day and check it out. Also got a pretty cool app that I spotted on GitHub. I think this came across Twitter. This was somebody's hackathon project at the MVP Summit. One thing that's really cool about it, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit on here, make it nice and big for you guys on the stream. One thing that's really cool is it is doing real-time switching between localization. So this is a really neat project. It's fully implemented a localization idea here, but you have to kind of manually switch it, but it does switch in real time. I think the author said they were waiting for support to be added in the framework to automatically detect the person's localization context. But until then, it's got the little switcher at the bottom. So this is a pretty neat setup, and it has like a resource file that loads in the different languages. So this is a really cool idea. It's definitely worth checking out. It's well written up. All the source code is there on GitHub. So good stuff there. Chris Sante's got another great article out there. This is something I was talking about last show, I think. It'd be really neat to see a fluent validation component for forms validation, and he's written up a whole tutorial on how to create something like that and implement that in Blazor. So he's got the full write-up here on his blog, and it's a really good read. It tells you a lot about how to create custom validation components and tie into the existing framework and what is already there. So good stuff, Chris, as usual. He's got quite a frequent blog about Razor and Blazor stuff, so make sure you guys check that out as well. So hopefully we've got enough folks joining now. Just want to give a little mention that it is spring break, so you may hear quite a bit of noise in the background. Kids are home, things are happening. We're just going to roll with it. So all good stuff, though. Let's just go ahead and jump into Visual Studio. I've got some fun demos today. We're going to start from scratch here, and I'm going to show you guys how I built something that's really an interesting take on how to separate your projects out. This is a little something I picked up from Steve Sanderson during the MVP Summit. I saw some of the structure in the way he was doing his demos. Made me curious as how he pulled some of these things off. And I was able to recreate some of the things that I had witnessed, and it really shows you how flexible the Razor Components framework is. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We're going to create a project today that has one single core application that then shells out to Razor Components or Blazor or whatever kind of hosting model that you'd like to use. This is really going to be handy for people that are frequently asking the question, how do I start with Razor Components now and reassure myself that I can port over to Blazor whenever it ships the official 1.0 release and is no longer experimental? So this should clear that question up for people, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a brand new project. We're going to try to do this from scratch. I have done this already once. There's a lot of little nuances to it, so we may fail along the way, but that's part of the show, right? Let's see. The first thing we need to do is do File New App and create a brand new application. This doesn't really matter where you start. It doesn't matter if you start with a Blazor app or a Razor Components app. At the end of the day, you're going to have both in this project anyhow. So let's go ahead and start with a Razor Components app. And let's pick a new directory here. I've already got one by that name, so we'll do Shell Apps is going to be our project name. The solution name I'm going to name different. Actually, no, sorry. The project name I want to be Razor Components. Let's do, RC Shell App. And the solution name I want different because I just want it to be Shell Apps. Like that, because I'm going to have multiple projects in this solution. What we're going to have is like a core project, and that core is going to have all of our real code base in it, our real application code, our pages, all that good stuff. And then we're going to add other projects to host that. So this is going to be our Razor Components hosting model, and we'll go ahead and create this guy. And let's see, did I click that good? Yep, I clicked it hard enough. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and make a Razor Components app. We'll go ahead and we'll allow this to be configured for HTTPS. I did have, actually, I'll leave this enabled because I think folks might. All right, nice to see you, Mr. Magoo and Goran. I see you in the chat room there as well. Welcome to the show. We're just getting ready to set up a new project and share code between different hosting models. I'm starting with a Razor Components app. It doesn't really matter what app you start with, but I'm going to choose Razor Components. I'm going to leave HTTPS configured for now. We may turn it off along the way, and I'll just leave it on to show you why we have to turn it off along the way. It's just has to do with local host and that kind of nonsense and certificate errors, and things just start going bad really quickly. If you're hosting this somewhere that has a proper certificate, you wouldn't run into these problems, but on your dev box, it can create some issues. So we'll work through those. I'm going to go ahead and spin this guy up. And once we spin this up, we'll hack away at it. We'll go ahead and get the Visual Studio 2019 instance up in the right location. And it's resolving some dependencies, so it's going to take a second to get up and running. There's nothing special here. This is just the usual File New Project. This is my Razor Components shell app. Right now it has quite a bit of stuff in it. We'll move that around in just a minute. Let's go ahead and do a quick Control F5 just to make sure that the app is running correctly. I always like to do this, even if it's a File New Project, just to make sure I don't get down the road and start hacking away at something and then realize that there's an error and start troubleshooting and figure out that it was never right from the get-go. So here we are. Hello world. We've got our counter component, our fetch data component. So this is everything we'd expect from File New Project, and it is up and running just like it should be. So good stuff so far. Now, here comes the fun part. We're going to take all of the core logic from this application and move it Thanks for following Agrafard. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome to the show. Hopefully you join us every week about this time. So here we have our Blazor component shell app, and all of our pages are underneath of here, shared components, the whole 9 yards. We also have a pages folder, and this is unique to a Blazor components app. Let's see, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here just in case it is a little small on the stream, because this stuff is really important to what we're going to be doing. We've got, and I hope this zooms in on the stream. I can't monitor the stream when I go into zoom mode, so I can't tell exactly what you guys are seeing. But I hope you're seeing my file explorer here, and I've got under my components folder is this pages folder. This is unique to Blazor components, and this is a Blazor pages set of pages here. And the Blazor pages in a Blazor components app are responsible for hosting or bootstrapping the application. So if I click on index CSHTML, you see this is the bootstrapping part of the app. In a Blazor components app, this will actually be index HTML, and it'll be in your www root folder. So just be aware of that. Goran says they should not have the Blazor extension, the Blazor components page name. Oh, so actually, yes, in this scenario, they should. So these are the ones that have the Blazor .Blazor extension because they are Blazor components. These are actually Blazor pages. So in a Blazor, I know all these Blazor terminologies are a little confusing. In a Blazor components app, it actually uses Blazor pages to get up and running. In a Blazor app, it uses just straight HTML to get up and running. So those are CSHTML files. Those are going to stay in the project. And we're going to actually move out the components folder to another app. So let's start with that. Let's do file, new project. We're going to add another project to this solution. It is going to be a class library, .NET Standard class library. I'm going to hit next, and I'm just going to call this one core app. This is going to be my core application that will be all of my components and all my Blazor components. I'm going to delete class 1. We don't need that. And now we should be left with just a .NET Standard library class, or class library. And I'm going to take the components folder, and I'm going to cut this out and paste it right here. So now we've got all of our application logic moved out to this component library. Next thing I want to do is, I believe it did move everything here, except this app.Blazor belongs back in the shell app, because this is going to be different depending on the application shell that we're using. So we'll move that guy back. Yeah, so we've got all of our pages, all of our shared stuff in this components folder. The next thing we need to do is link these two items together. And we're also going to have to pull in some dependencies here because we don't have the Blazor components library in there. So let's go ahead and add a reference and link these two things together. So whoops, I need to be under dependencies, add a reference, and I'm going to go out and grab my core app solution. So that's going to give me a reference, and I'll be able to find these components now. So some people joining the show. Hello, Sedhow and Janescu. Welcome to the show. We are working on a project or a solution with multiple projects where we're going to have all of our logic. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show, buddy. my coworker, HTTP Junkie there. We're putting all of our core application code in Core App, and we're going to host this on different Blazor hosting models. So we're going to use Razor components and Blazor. I've already linked these two together. I'm probably going to get quite a few build errors right now because I've moved things around from one project to another. You can see we have some namespaces missing and things like that. I need to add some dependencies in here as well. I'm going to do manage NuGet packages. And actually, let's do this from the top level. It might be a little easier to see what we're managing. So we'll do manage NuGet packages for the solution. And then let's see what we have installed. This isn't what I wanted. Hang on once. There we go. Yeah, this is what I wanted. So we have Razor Components Server. We want, let's see what we've got in here. .NET Standard Library. I need just Razor Components. I have server here. And why am I not seeing? Okay, there we go. Components browser. Just want to make sure I've got all my dependencies I absolutely need in here. And just to double check, there we go. Layout component base is not lit up. View imports has there. These are the things I need. ASP.NET Core components. Let's make sure we've got a reference to that. That's what I wanted. I only want to reference things I absolutely need. And I want to make sure, lost in all these tabs here. Hang on, let me declare tab bankruptcy real quick. Close all these tabs out, and I want my view imports because this has all of my namespaces that I really need. So I want to grab Microsoft ASP.NET Core components, and that's the dependency I want to add. So a little manual setup here, but once it gets going, you'll notice that there's some really cool stuff that we can do. Let's see, why can't I find components? Is it in ASP? Let's see, ASP.NET Core. Where is .components at? And why am I not seeing the reference to components in here? Let's check this Blazor Shell app out real quick. Components server. I don't want just the server stuff though. Dependencies, manage NuGet packages. Why is that not coming up? Is that not the proper namespace? Well, let's go ahead and grab JS interop. And NuGet's being fun today. It's not resolving components for some reason. Oh, I didn't include pre-release. That's what it is. These are all still pre-release, so they weren't showing up on the list. There we go. All right. I normally have pre-release checked. I don't know how that got unchecked, but it's a good learning experience there. If you're looking for the Razor components NuGet packages, they are still in pre-release. Until they go 1.0, they won't show up unless that checkbox is checked. So there we go. That's what I was looking for. Let's go ahead and get this guy. It will bring in my JS interop, so I won't have to worry about that. So you can see those lit up. This is going to change, so I need to rename this because I moved these files from the other project here, and this is going to be core app. So that will point to my core app components namespace here. And let's see, let's make sure this will, let's do a clean and rebuild, and that should help resolve some of these lingering errors here. So build succeeded. I'm not sure why I've got an underscore there still. We'll go ahead and close that out. I might just need to close it and reopen it. Sometimes that will, there it is. That takes care of the situation. So we just needed to, we moved these components out of the Razor Components app and into this class library. I'm still getting an error there for some reason. I'm not getting a build error, so I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not showing it in this window either, so it just must be a little bit of a Visual Studio bug, let's hope. So I moved those out and grabbed the proper dependencies to make sure that those components are have the dependencies they need. And then I've got a reference to those dependencies and those components through Core App. So let's try to rerun this and see what happens. Can expect that there's actually some problems because we moved those components out. There's still some broken namespaces over on the Blazor Shell app side of the fence, so we need to fix those. These went to Core App. So core app.components, let's see. This is not playing along today. Let's see here. So it's saying that it can't find core app.components. So there must be something not allowing this to compile still. Do a quick rebuild. I'm not getting an error there. Yes, this is CoderCat. This is .NET Core Preview 3. So .NET Core 3 Preview 3. And I think we'll see another preview here shortly. I would imagine next week sometime there's going to be another one. I'm going to try another clean solution here. And we'll do another rebuild solution and see what happens. It's still not able to resolve this namespace for some reason. So I have, double check. Let's go ahead and remove this for a sec and re-add it. It's kind of just a little sanity check. We are not getting... Oh, that did more harm than good. So let's see. MVC does not exist in this namespace. So let's see. It's asking for the MVC namespace, or the ASP.NET Core namespace. So let's go ahead and try to add that as well. Don't remember hitting this roadblock on my initial pass of this, but we'll go ahead and do that anyway. So we need Microsoft ASP.NET Core. We'll go ahead and add this dependency as well. Just getting these dependencies resolved out, and then we'll possibly be able to build this out. Once it gets going, it's pretty smooth. I promise. Famous last words. Wow. Let's see here. What is going on with our dependencies? Let's give this a try. I'm going to go ahead and blow this project out. Let's close this solution. I may have used a Razor Components library last time. There may be something in there that's just not getting resolved with the tooling. So let's try restarting this one time. And if this doesn't work, I've got a backup solution. Let's do a brand new ASP.NET Core web app. Let's do RC Shell app. We'll make this the Shell apps solution. We'll let's put a number 2 on the end because it looks like I named it the same as last time. We need a brand new Razor Components app. Let's get that guy dropped into the solution, and we'll double check and make sure everything is working as it should. Yeah, there's some type of namespacing issue going on. There's also a possibility that there's a the project type I chose wasn't correct. I'm going to drop down to the command line because we don't have a proper file new project experience for this yet. It is something that I believe they will add eventually, but let's go ahead and add a Razor Components library app. So I'm going to drop out to my command line. We'll zoom in so we can see nice and good on the stream. Let's see. This is my main app, or my Razor Components app. Let's drop down a level to the solution level. And this may have been where I went wrong. I did an ASP.NET Core .NET, or sorry, a .NET Standard library, and it may have needed to be a Razor Components library. So we'll do .NET New, Blazor lib will give us a Blazor library project, and I did it in the wrong directory, so we're gonna have to move this out. I dropped it right at the solution level. So what we can do here is just remove those files. I'm gonna jump over to my Explorer. We'll just do new folder and just move everything in there. I wanted this to be called core app. And then content, object, not shell app, component 1, example interop. Those all belong under core app. So there's our core app. And I'm missing the csproj file. Didn't see a csproj file drop in here. Let's try this. Let's remove this again. This is just fail city today. Let's try doing new folder and then doing it in the correct place. Core app. So I need to go over to core app and then .NET New. Blazor lib will give us a Blazor library project. And there we go. So actually it did drop the project. That's it was the wrong name. So there we go. Now it should be properly named. Yep, there it is. So with that said, let's come over here and add that to the solution. Add existing existing project. This is where I went wrong last time. We should have had a Razor Components or Blazor library project instead of a .NET Standard solution. I have a lot of other stuff going in the last sample app that I made, where I have a lot of .NET Standard libraries I added to it as well. So I got a little confused. So shell apps 2, core app, and grab our csproj file from there. And this is nice because it comes with all of our dependencies already intact, so we won't run into those namespace issues, hopefully. So you can see I've got the ASP.NET Core components, browser and build are in there. That's probably what I was missing last time when I just chose a standard library instead. So we have all the tooling. We also have the analyzers. And this is a .NET Standard library, but it has some extra things in it that we need. We do not need content, we don't need component 1, and we don't need the example interop. These are essentially our class 1.cs type of thing that we would have normally deleted anyway. These are just little placeholders that they add to give you a little bit of something to check and make sure everything's working correctly. So let's move these again. So we want to move all of this stuff actually, let's move the Razor app, or the app.razor, up to the root level, and then we'll move with a cut and paste. We'll move all of the components up into this app here. And now we shouldn't have any build errors. Yeah, we still did. There is one. And this is possibly this namespace issue here. This should now be core app. There we have IntelliSense. That's a good sign. That wasn't working for us last time. Let's try a quick build again. Another namespace is missing. This is on a compiled bit here. So in weather forecast, I can see Shoddy -DS. Hello, how you doing? Welcome to the show. Under shared, we're gonna have. Oh, let's see. Where is? So it can't find weather forecast. From fetch data, it's got weather forecasts, and since we moved it to another project, we don't have weather forecast. There's weather forecast. So we need to move services as well. So we need to take this over and put this in our core app. We're moving all that core logic over to our core application. So now we've got the services, and the namespace is going to have to change here. So we've got core app services, and we've got core app here. So for right now, this should be good enough. Let's try another build. See if we can get rid of all those pesky errors. We've got errors everywhere. All right, let's see if we can try to pick off some of these errors as they come up. We've still got, oh yeah, I still have some namespace issues here. So we've got to change all these to core app from where they were pulling from the original Razor Components app. So we'll just go whack-a-mole these real quick. The ones that have a .g are the compiled version. We don't need to worry about those. We can do a clean. That should get rid of those. And we still, I think I saw one more pop up in there. Oh, no, there we go. We have a successful build. So now we've got all of our Razor components built. And the services are okay there as well for now, because the services don't depend on anything hosting specific. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. So now we've moved all of our core application logic out. And we should be able to add a reference to the core app project, and it should build like normal. Let's give that a try. So let's do a build at the solution level and see what happens. All right, so we've still got a couple little namespace issues here. Because we moved these out and we now reference to them, we've got to change core app. Oops, not constructor. Core app here. I'm just going to put this on my clipboard because it's being used in several places. Let's see, we're not even using that one there. We'll leave it for now in case we need it. That one is, oh, the compiler just kicked in and wiped that error out for us. And we can close that. Make sure we save everything. Let's do one more rebuild, but I think we got all little bugs now. And oh, got one more left. View imports still has one in the, let's see, where is this guy at? It is in the Shell app, view imports. So there's a view imports here, and it's calling for components. So we need core app components. Whoa. And IntelliSense just wiped the whole thing out. Never seen that happen before. Copying and pasting stuff out of applications into another always kind of runs into these issues. So this is nothing unique to Blazor or anything. It's just if I would have built these from scratch, we wouldn't run into these, but building these templates out from scratch is kind of a pain on its own. It's a whole different set of problems that we'd need to fix. So now we should be able to run this. So I'm going to have, so RC Shell app is the app. I'm going to click on run here. And now, even with those things completely separated out, hopefully we get this and it runs with no problems. We'll let that spin for a sec. I'm not sure why it's taking so long, but there we go. Hello world, and we can go to counter. We can fetch data. Everything is working fine. So this is a great start. This is exactly what I wanted. So let's take a look at what's happening here. I'll zoom in again so we can see really well. Let me know in the chat room if you can see when I do these zooms, because again, I can't tell when I do the window zoom if this is showing up in the feed properly. So let me know if this works. If I'm zooming in like this, can you guys see a zoomed in version, and is that helpful to you? I'm going to zoom out for a second because I can't even see chat room. Yes, you can see fine. Thanks, SQL, Mr. Magoo. It's very helpful for me to know that you guys can see this. So I want you guys to get a good look at the folder architect, or the component and application architecture here, because what we have is we have core app and we have a shell app. Again, this isn't something I figured out completely on my own. I saw Steve doing some demos, Steve Sanderson, and I thought this was a really cool idea. He didn't quite show how to do this, so I kind of hacked around this week to try to figure out how he had pulled this off. But Blazor Components is smart enough to see that if you have a library linked to your application, it can find the components and route them and everything just fine. So in my Blazor Components app, my core app, I have all of my components under pages. I have all of my page level components under shared. Everything is working fine in there. My view imports. I even have my services for the application right now in here. The services, we will change some of those if they are dependent on if I'm in my if I'm running in the browser or on Razor components. Those services might need to be swapped out. So we'll see how that plays out. I also have this Razor Components shell app where these files originated, but now they are in their own project. And we'll go ahead and minimize that guy down. So core app has all of our component logic. This does nothing more than host our app now. So the pages you see in here are not component pages. They are just this is just the bootstrapper. This is nothing more than, say, an index HTML file, but this one is using Razor pages. So nothing Blazor related in this project. The only thing that's left is this app.razor, and that's because you need that to bootstrap the application. And I'll show where that lives in just a moment. And that will be unique to each shell because it will have a different target each time, or in each scenario. So let's zoom back out of that. And I'll go ahead and open that Razor, app.razor. Let's declare tab bankruptcy again. Let's close all but this. Let me bump this font size up as well. This search feature is really handy in Visual Studio, especially in 2019. There is a lot of improvements on it. It's one of my favorite features. I'm glad to see it getting some additional love this time around. So our app.razor has our router in it. And our router tells the application where to find the root of our application and where the Razor components begin. And as long as it has the assembly name, it should be fine. Since this is a Razor Pages app, it uses this index page to start up, and it resolves all the components just fine. this is all we need to make our app work. So this is just a shell now. It's just a Razor Components shell, and it hosts up these components from our core app. So far so good. Let's add another app, and let's host this on WebAssembly next. So let's do add, so we got to stop running the application first. Let's do add new project. And I'm going to choose ASP.NET Core Web Application. And if you guys have questions at any time, please feel free to stop me from rambling and answer questions. I'm going to choose an ASP.NET Core Web Application. Now that we're up and running, this thing is going to run a lot smoother. At least that's the way I plan it. Let's go ahead and add a new project. We'll call this one Blazor Shell. How did I name that last one? Shell app. So we'll say app at the end. Blazor Shell app. We'll go ahead and add that to our project. We want to make sure this is indeed a Blazor app. I'm going to choose just Blazor. I don't need the hosting. We could do the hosting version if we wanted to. We could do either one of these, Blazor or Blazor hosted. It would work in either scenario. It's just this one's going to give me more projects than I want. We already have 2, and we're going to add a third. I don't need another additional 2. I think you get 3 with this one. You get the shared, you get the hosting, and then you get the client app. So we'd have a total of 5, and that's just a little overkill for a simple demo. Just to make things easy, we'll choose Blazor. So Blazor is the Blazor Shell app is now added to the project. Let's see, its dependencies got resolved. It's got pages. It's got shared. It has app. And what we want to do, and these these haven't been updated to. I'm trying to remember if that was Janescu or who said this earlier. These don't have the .razor extension on them. So if we zoom in, you can see the pages don't have a .razor on them. Those should. It just hasn't been updated by the team yet. So the template hasn't been updated. They work just the same. However, we're not going to need these. We already have them in our core app, right? So that's the point of what we're doing, is we're centralizing all of our logic. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of all this. So we don't need pages and we don't need shared anymore, because all of that already exists in core app. I just broke my cardinal rule, by the way. I was supposed to control F5 and show that Blazor app worked before we started hacking away at it. So we're going to just move along because it's gone now. I deleted files out of it and broke it already. All right, so under dependencies, we need to add a reference to, once again, core app. We'll hit OK here. And notice I left a view imports in here, which is fine. We need to have this. This is going to now host the core stuff. So core app needs to be here. And that is an interesting piece of IntelliSense. I don't know why it's doing that. I haven't seen it do that before. That's a new bug. So this should be core app. I don't know why it's wiping out my using statement. That's not fun. We'll move core app there. And it actually will be, it's not core app.shared anymore. It's core app.components.shared. So we got to watch our namespaces. This is where things get tricky. We just need to make sure we're getting a reference to everything there. Startup, let's see if we broke anything in here. Nothing seems to be broken. App. This is where I got hung up in a previous kind of experiment trying to do this. We need to find the absolute root component, but now since we need the component that has routing. In this scenario, we have this index page that comes from Razor pages, which will give us an initial route. This, however, doesn't have that. So what we need to do is find the page with the initial route. And what I mean is I need my index page, the one with just the root routing for the application. So what we can do is target this component library. And it gets a little tricky here. So what we need to do is it's going to need the assembly name of that. And we need to say core app dot. We need to go until we find something we can actually target in here. And view imports is going to be that first thing that we can find. And that is enough actually for the compiler to figure out where those components are and what has the root route of the application. And it will be able to resolve it. So now that I've got those in place, let's try a rebuild. Let's see what happens. Let's see. Shotty says, can we not use the index HTML in www root in the Blazor shell to launch it? Yeah, Lauren's correct. Not for the router, because if you look at the router says app assembly equals type of. So it's looking for a type. So that's what's actually going here. It's going to be a system.reflection.assembly is what it's looking for router. So if I were to put an index HTML here, that would just be a static file, and it wouldn't understand. That's not a C# class. So it wouldn't be able to get assembly from that. So this is going to be able to get the assembly from core app by pointing it at that that class. So we're actually pointing at a class, not specifically a file, if that makes sense. Looks like everything built. So let's try to give this guy a run. We need to come up here and switch our project to the shell app. And I'm going to do a quick run here. I have had this completely hang Visual Studio for some reason in the past. So if something goes wrong and I have to restart Visual Studio, it's not essentially a problem with what we're doing. It's just, I don't know what that issue is, but it does happen from time to time. We're loading. We've got an app. Look at that. We can hit the counter. We can hit fetch data, and something went wrong. So let's see what's wrong with fetch data. So something went awry when we hit fetch data. Cannot provide a value for property forecast on type core app components, fetch data. There's no registered service type. Interesting. So what does that mean? If it says there is no registered service type. So let's close this out. We'll take a look. And what we're going to have to do is remember the steps we took to get where we're at. We took the components from a Razor. Yep, that's exactly it, Lauren. So folks that are new, I'm kind of explaining the process of what we did earlier. So we initially took all of the components from a Razor Components app and centralized them in Core App. So the app is initially set up with these weather forecast services. If we look at our Razor Components app, you can see where we took it from. There is a service for it. Add singleton, weather forecast services. We're going to actually just borrow this piece of code and go to our startup for our Blazor Shell app and just make sure that we register that same service here. So there we have our weather service. We need to add our using statement. So I'm going to control period for that. And there's our core app services. So we'll go ahead and get that implemented there, and dependency injection should be able to resolve that now. If we rerun the app, we should be able to see it. So let's see what's going on, chat. So Shadi, yeah, it was registered in Core App. So we saw that we just needed to register it in the other application and make sure the namespace was correct. Janescu says I turn every file what I use script tag to Razor extension. Oh, okay. So you're a stickler for the .razor extensions on the app. Yeah. So we have an app.razor and we have an app.cshtml. We could actually change that one to .razor as well, and it would work just fine. It does help identify which files are components and which ones are pages. So I kind of get where you're coming from. We can do some cleanup later on to make sure those things are all tidy. So we've got the counter component working still. There's our fetch data. So boom. Now we've got two applications, and all of the core logic is in this components folder. So what do you guys think of this so far? Is this cool, or this? Do you see the value here? Because so far what we've done allows us to have one logic and two shells where we can host however we'd like our application to host. Like this so far? Cool. Let's have some fun with it now that we got it working and it's up and running. So let's create a service. Let's do something really neat. This will set us up for some, like Lauren said, some easier transitions later. It's basically Xamarin for web apps. Interesting. I don't do Xamarin, but I'm assuming what you mean by that is in Xamarin, having zero experience, what I'm going to say is you would probably have an iOS shell and Android shell maybe, and there's like a core logic for each one of those targets. Maybe that's the comparison you're drawing. I don't have enough Xamarin experience to know. I'm just kind of grasping at straws. So let's see. Let's take our index page and let's do something cool. Oh, so exactly. Oh, nice. That was a good guess by me. That's a cool perspective, though. Thanks for sharing that, Shoddy. It's nice to have some Xamarin devs in the audience to have some different perspective. Let's play with this hello world thing. It's really simple, I know, but we're going to take this index page. And remember, if we change anything in the index page, no matter which app we're in, no matter what shell we're in, it's going to be changing both of those experiences. So let's do hello world, but let's do a different message depending on if we're in Blazor or Razor components. So how can we do that? Let's create a service, and let's do this. Let's say new item, and let's create an interface, and we'll call it hello world service. Okay, so we have a brand new interface. We need to make sure this is public. That always catches me. I don't know why, but I always forget to make my interfaces public. So we have this hello world service, and let's go ahead and give it a property. This is going to be a string, and it's going to be called message. Now let's be a little more explicit. Let's say hello message, and it is going to have a getter. Okay, simple stuff. So we just need to implement this hello message. Now we can come over to our index page and we can say inject hello. Let's see, we need a using statement first, right? Or we can just say services. Services.hello. There we go. That's a little bit easier. We're only going to use one thing out of services in here. We don't need to put using statements all over. And we can say service is what it's going to resolve to. So now instead of hello world, we'll have @service hello message. Come on, IntelliSense. Don't let me down. So now we can do this, and now we can choose how that message gets resolved depending on which app we're in. Make sense so far? So we're not implementing the interface anywhere in the services. So we're going to just leave Hello World service where it's at. And we'll open up our Blazor Shell app, and we will create a brand new add folder and services. Create a services folder. Inside of that folder, I'll do add class. And we need to create a new class called Hello World Service. Hello World Service.cs. Classes are public by default, so we don't have to change that, but we do need to implement the Hello World. So this is going to be core app services Hello World service. So go ahead and implement that interface. Notice we have red squigglies because we haven't implemented anything. I can be super lazy here and just tell Visual Studio to go ahead and implement that interface for me, and it'll stub it out. So notice it created a public string. It's using a expression-bodied member to tell us what it's going to return. Instead of throwing an exception, let's just say hello from WASM. So we have hello from WebAssembly, and we go ahead and save that. We don't need system.threading tasks and all this stuff. We'll go ahead and just clean that up. And we just need to tell our dependency injection container where to find it. I'll just duplicate this line here and say we need a core app dot services hello world service. It looks like I already have that namespace implemented here, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. Wherever we see the hello world service, we need to use a services dot hello world service. So we'll go ahead and resolve our hello world service that says hello from WASM. Cool, got that. So we can minimize that. We also need to do the same thing over here because this one doesn't implement anything. We can create a new folder, services. And we can add a new class. And we're going to do the same exact thing, hello world service. And this is going to implement the same core app services hello world service. So same interface. We'll take the same shortcut and just say implement that interface. I'm going to try to close this down just a little bit. It's taking up a lot of real estate. And zoom in a little on the text. There we go. That's better. We'll make sure everybody can see well in the stream. Now we can say hello from the server, like that. And we can customize that message. We can save this. We just need to register it. Now remember, we've already in our core app index injected it, so we don't need to go back and change anything there. We only need to register a service here. So we can duplicate this line because I'm lazy and I don't type, and say hello world service. Wherever I see one of you, I'm going to implement services hello world service. That's actually the same identical piece of code from the other application. We could have just copied it over if we really wanted to be lazy. Regarding WASM, do you guys read about running WebAssembly outside the browser? I saw this going across my Twitter feed today, actually. So it's excellent share there, Goran. So if you guys are in the chat room, make sure you check out that link that Goran just posted. There's stuff going on to let WebAssembly run outside of the context of a browser. So that could make the use cases for Blazor even bigger. So I'm all for it. So now we've got those two interfaces implemented. Let's rebuild this solution. And I don't see any errors so far. Everything looks good. Famous last words. And we should be able to run these apps independently. There we go. All three succeeded. Now we can go and we can do Control F5. I'm not going to run these with debugging because if I do, then it locks me out of running the other apps. So Control F5, and I've got one app running. And then I'm going to drop this drop-down box and say Control F5. And I've got two apps running. And then we'll split these up, do a little Windows key magic, and then boom. So one service interface, two implementations. I'll ask again, what do you guys think of this so far? Pretty cool? This is if you're not seeing the value yet, imagine what we can do with fetch data. Right now, it's just pulling a static service that just runs either on Razor components or WebAssembly. What if we had somewhere to get, now if we can have the client and server from the same project. Right now, those things are a little mismatched. So there, I'm sure we could probably hack something together. What's happened right now is they've decided to go with this Razor Pages bootstrapping thing that happened here. There's no index page anymore. It just overcomplicates things for right now. But we have this ability, so all of our code is still essentially in one place. Another thing we would run into, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have everything in one app, because it's still probably a great idea. The services get a little weird when you do that. I've noticed when you add things to a Blazor app now, you get compiler errors if they don't have a target for the platform. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I know from another project I was working on with this concept, things can break very quickly if you add a dependency to this Blazor app that doesn't run client-side. Shoddy says, I remember a long time ago I did an online web session where I did not too dissimilar thing, which allowed me to just drop in the routes in the MVC app and let dependency injection pick them up. Very cool. Love the client slide, shared division between code projects, and the Blazor outside the browser is awesome. All right, guys. Let's see. We've got these two things going. Let's tackle this. Let's see. How are we doing on time? We're an hour in. Let's see. Should I just open up my other app and go from there? Or should I just build it from scratch is what I'm trying to figure out. There's quite a few hurdles I ran into trying to do this. Let's go ahead and just try to build it from scratch. We'll get as far as we can. I have a backup project if things get too long. We're already on 1 hour. But if we get too far into this and we're not getting as far as we'd like, we will we'll jump over to the finished. Build it from scratch. All right, let's do it. So let's see. How's your other ML project coming for my talk? Lauren, is coming good. The the machine learning part of it, I believe, is done from my perspective. That's actually a good point. It won't be next week because I'm going to be out the first half of the week because of the Visual Studio launch party that I'm going to be part of. When I come back and I have significant time, I actually will probably do more shows during the week. And I'd like to build some of that solution for that talk on the show. So we'll see how that works out. If that's something that I can work into my schedule, that's something I'd really like to do. So hopefully we'll have more shows coming by the end of next month. So April, hopefully we'll start doing more than one show a week. We'll see what I can do. If I have the time for that, I definitely would like to do it. So thanks for asking. It's coming along well. Let's try now. We're going to replace this service for, let's see, I'm in my core app. We have weather forecast here that is used on both apps, and the service implementation is inside of this. So let's do some failing together, because this is a little more difficult because of the way the Razor Components app is set up. It makes things a little bit harder. Again, I'm going to declare tab bankruptcy, close all documents. Thanks for the follow, Hargiston. Let's see, CoderCat says server-side Blazor is pretty different from the client-side. Server uses WebSockets and SignalR and no WebAssembly. It uses, it uses SignalR, so that's correct. There is no WebAssembly. The core components, though, are all built the same. So what we need to do is, if we're on the client and we know we're running from the client's context, if we go, let's see, components, pages, fetch data. Right now, weather forecast service comes from forecast service, which is doing an await on forecast service, get forecast service async, which forecast service itself is nothing but where'd it go? Sorry, it's in, services, weather forecast service. It's nothing more than a regular class that spins up some random data. So we can host this anywhere, and the application doesn't care if we're on the client or in the cloud or wherever it is. This isn't very realistic. This isn't something that normally happens. What we need is we need this to be implemented on the Razor Components app as a service, because this would be normally like Entity Framework, right? So this would be hosted server side. So let's take the weather forecast service server side. Before we do that, let's go ahead and create extracted interface and get weather forecast service async. That takes a date time. That's what we want to have. And instead of the fetch data here being from weather forecast service, we want to get it from weather forecast service. So now we have an interface that we can swap out as needed. And we need to move weather forecast service out into services. So now we have two of them. We need to delete the one from the core app, not just delete the name off of it, but delete it completely. So that one is gone. Weather forecast can stay. Weather forecast service had to go. So we've got this now. The namespace needs a change. It's no longer in core app. Let's not have this bite us. This needs to be RC shell app services. There is no such thing as a iWeather forecast service because we don't have the proper namespace. So control period should fix that up for us. and that did. So now we have an implementation of it, and we already have the injection for it here, but it's under the wrong namespace. So we need the Razor Components Services version of it. And I believe that will fix all of our build errors. Let's see. The Blazor Shell app, now we have an error because we don't have an implementation here. I'm going to leave this as an error for now because we're not going to run the client-side app just yet. Let's go ahead and close that one. We don't need to look at our startup anymore. This won't change. Let's leave this open for the time being. We might need this in a minute. Let's make sure we understand we're on the Razor Components app because the Blazor app is currently broken. We're not going to run that one. Just make sure this runs as it should. Let's go ahead and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, and it should fetch data. And it didn't. So let's see why. Let's do a quick inspect. Something broke. What was it? Cannot provide a property value for forecast service on type fetch data. There's no registered service. Oh, I think I know what I goofed up. Let's double check. I didn't do the dependency injection correctly. So while we're doing a weather forecast service, we need an weather forecast service to make this correct. Oops, not hello world. Weather forecast service. So that dependency injection was wrong. Since we now have this namespace available, I can get rid of that. So now we're saying I want to put an weather forecast service here. And fetch data should, fetch data is looking for an weather forecast service. It didn't have one. That's why the error went the way it did. Oh, thanks, Mr. Magoo. I didn't see the message there. Yeah, that was it. You guys beat me to it. You guys are awesome. You guys helped me through so many issues on this stuff. Best chat room ever. So now we should be able to run this no problem. Things get tricky when we go client side with this. This is the easy part. So boom, we've got our service. We're on the server with the service. So this service might shell out to. That's bad terminology. That's not what I meant. This service might have calls to any framework in it. We can show some of that later. We're going to run with this as is for now. What I want to do next is how do we make this available to Blazor Shell app? Well, we need to host the data somewhere. I could do add new web API app. I could do new project, add a web API project to this. Then we're going to have 4 projects. That is an option. It's not necessary though. We already have a server hosted thing here. I'm just going to reuse this. This doesn't mean it's best practice, whatever. It's just I already have it. I'm going to go ahead and utilize it. So in here, let's add a new folder. And we'll call this controllers. So I have a new controllers folder. Let's add a new item. I'm going to go over here and do web control API controller class because this is going to give me some help in remembering all of the little bits that go with this. I'm going to call it weather controller. So now I have a weather controller, and it has lots of methods that I do not need. But I like to have them stubbed out in case I need something. So I'm going to go ahead and comment them out for now. Right now it returns value 1 and 2. Why not gRPC instead? I know nothing about it. That's why, Goran. I don't know if that's baked in yet. I don't know if that works in .NET Core 3.0 yet. Not sure. I know nothing about it. So I'm going to run with what I know, and that is Web API. So if I run this now, sorry, I'm being a little silly there, but it's the truth. I don't know anything about it. If I run this right now and I try to hit API/weather, because this is weather controller, so it'd be API/weather. I should hit this get. Let's put a breakpoint here. Actually, I did Control F5. We're never going to hit that breakpoint if we're not debugging, but we'll leave that breakpoint there in case we do debug. So I should be able to go to API/weather and return those values, but I am not. And instead I get an empty page, which this is kind of an annoying thing with the routing in Blazor. So I don't have this API weather controller for some reason. This took me a little bit of time to figure out the other day. It's because Razor component apps just don't have the routing for Web API. So we need to add that. So in the Startup CS, sorry, I went a little fast there if that was a little too quick. I clicked on Startup CS in the Razor Components app, and I'm in the Startup under Configure. And under Configure, I'm going to say Routes. Trying to remember what this is called. It is Web. Oh no, it is API something or other. Nope. I am going to cheat and look at another app that I've built. So give me a sec. I can't remember the namespace, and it's not going to just show up on its own. Let's see what it is that I need for a web API. I could do file new web API project and look in there. There's a lot of ways I could find this. I could Google Bing it. Or I could just look at the thing I built last week, which is what I'm going to do. So let's see. Under Razor Components, we need... It is map controllers, because we're trying to map a controller. So that is what we needed. It's a little more self-explanatory than I thought it was going to be, and a little embarrassed for not knowing that, actually. That's too easy. So I believe this is what we need, and all of what we need. Let's go ahead and run in debug mode, just in case we do not hit that endpoint. Hopefully we do. If we can hit that endpoint, we're good to go. We've got an easier road ahead of us. So fetch data. Oh, we don't need fetch data. We need /API/weather. And we hit it. So that was it. That was all we needed to add. Was the registration for routing for APIs. So that added the ability for the application to look and see these route attributes and go ahead and set up the routing for Web API. So now we can hit our values here, and we're going to get value 1 and 2 out. I'm not using Entity Framework right now, so I do want to make you guys aware of a current issue. There is a bug right now that has an issue on ASP.NET Core 3. If you are running against Entity Framework and you have values that have navigation properties, so say customers, and that has a navigation property for a customer's order history, something like that. There is this weird error that has to do with Newtonsoft and running values through that and serializing those navigation values. And the error makes little to no sense. You have to search it. When you search it, it comes up to a GitHub issue where it's a known problem that they're working through. So I'll avoid that for now. I can show that at the very end because I have a project where all I have to do is on comment a line and we can look at that error. Just want to make sure you guys are aware that it exists. So for now, let's see. We have a weather controller. We have a service that we can already use to get our weather data. Let's just piggyback off of that. And to do that, it's very easy. We first need to stop debugging so we can edit our code. And we just need to create a constructor. I'm going to do ctor tab. That's the easiest way to get a constructor for me. Thanks, Mr. Magoo. Have a great weekend too. Keep on hacking and making cool stuff. I'll try to show some of your work on the show again. I know you've always got something you're tinkering with. So have a good one, buddy. Weather controller. Constructor needs to take services. So we need an iWeather service. Do control dot. Did I call that wrong? It is weather forecast service. Let me make sure I spell that right so I don't end up with this interface created somewhere. iWeather forecast service. We'll add our using statement. I'm just going to call it service here. And we need to, oh, this is a great trick. We can come over to where service is. I haven't implemented the, by navigation property, what do I mean, Goran? So here, I'll stub this out. So if I have, here, I'll show. It's easier for me to show. I'm going to open another instance here. So I'm going to pop out to shell app. Let's jump out to here real quick. Well, I'll show the error later. I'll keep this open in the background. If I have a controller, where did Visual Studio end up? This is not the right project. Did I open two of the same one? Is that what I did? Shell Apps 2. I grabbed the wrong one. Oh, that one has changes. This one does not. That was the wrong one. Okay. Let me try this one more time. I just got to find the project I worked on yesterday because it has some of these in it. And that's the one right there. So this other project I have has an NAD framework in it, and it has navigation props and all that good stuff. And it got to be a really big headache for me to figure out what exactly it was trying to do. So these are navigation props. So basically anything with a foreign key in your database. So I have dbcontext.employees. Managers is a foreign key. Employees is a foreign key. Reports to is a foreign key to other tables. These fail miserably during serialization to JSON. And this is something that's new that I've never run into before. So I didn't know why the error was being caused. I just was frustrated. And returning an object that includes any of these in it will cause an error. And I'll show the error in a little bit so you guys will be aware of it. Hopefully it'll be fixed by preview 4 because it's really a sticky one. I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what exactly was going on. The explanation of it on the issue isn't very clear as to what exactly the problem is. It just says that they're aware of it, they broke something with a new change, but it doesn't say like it's really tied to any framework or anything like that, so it's hard to debug. Anyhow, we'll come back to that at the end. Right now, we have our weather controller, and we need to inject a service on it. And I've created the constructor where I want the injector to be. So this is a really handy tip here in Visual Studio, is you can just come in and click the magic light bulb, or you can hit Alt-Enter in case the light bulb gets away from your mouse like it's doing to me. You can say create and initialize a property or a field. I'm going to choose a field and just let it automatically write that code for me. So now I have a private read-only property of the weather forecast service. And it's just going to assign the value when it's created. Dependency injection will take care of this for me because it already has a registration for iWeather forecast service. So I don't have to do any work there. Shoddy says, I got a -2. I know, can I get a community shout out to the UK near City of Leeds? I'm going on stage this evening, doing an introduction to Blazor. Oh, nice. Yeah, absolutely. Glad you could share that. If you tweet it to me, Shoddy, my Twitter handle is the same as the one here in the chat room, just like that with the @ symbol on it. If you tweet it to me, I will retweet it for you if that will help. I don't know how many people from that area follow me on Twitter, but it doesn't hurt to try, right? I'd be happy to do that. Nice, thanks. So good luck on that. Good luck on your presentation this evening. Great stuff. Love to see people getting involved with meetups. It's a good place to share knowledge and work on networking and stuff. So take care. So we've got our weather forecast service coming in, and we already have everything here built. So we just need to return the right thing and say we want to return a enumerable. Oh, we're already enumerable on here. Weather forecast object is what we're going to send back. And we just need to return a service dot why don't we have get, there is get forecast async. This is going to trip me up a little bit. We need to make this a task of enumerable. There we go. And if it is returning a task, then it has to be async. And we're going to get weather forecast async, so this has to be an await. So there we go. Service.getForecastAsync. And it needs a date and time. So we're just going to call date time now. We're going to grab the server time for now. We could pass this in. What is it picking? Oh, is that a property? It's not a method. Date time now. There we go. We could pass it in the get. Oh, it's not this. No, even better. So people have time to prep for that, Shoddy, and get signed up for it. Good stuff. We could pass in this date time from the client. We'll just go ahead and use the server to make this easy on ourselves. So now we should be able to hit this endpoint and get weather back. So now the point here is we're reusing code, right? We didn't write a brand new implementation of the weather service. We're just hosting that weather service up on an API instead. Instead of grabbing it directly from the application. So this is still a Razor Components app. Our Razor Components app is now also a web API app. This could be a web API app on its own, but we already had a server, so why not just go ahead and use it? There's our weather data. So we can tell that we have weather data. So we're good to go there. Now we have to consume that weather API on the client. So how do we wire that up? So again, we already have the service called iWeather Forecast Service. We already have the shared object here in services. We just need to create a weather forecast service here. So I'm going to do add class. And I need to say weather forecast service. Or weather, what would I call it on the other one? Weather forecast service. because I want it to match my interface just to make things easy. Weather forecast service needs to implement weather weather forecast service. Control period. I need to bring in my namespace. So there we go. The red underscores now are because I need to implement my interface. I'll let Visual Studio do that for me. Control enter, then enter is a quick shortcut for that. This is, I guess I shot myself in the foot here a little bit because this method expects a date and time. We're not passing it along. It's okay, I can leave it that way for now. What is important here is I need to resolve, I need to get the data somehow and resolve that back as a task of weather forecast. So how do I do that? On the client side is I need HTTP. So just like in the Razor component side of this, I am going to create a constructor. So ctor double tab gets me a constructor, and then on my constructor, I need an HTTP client, and I need to make sure I get the right HTTP client. This tripped me up before. Let's make sure this works, but I believe I got the right one here. We'll just say HTTP. And then Control Enter again. Whoops. Control Enter on HTTP will get me my read-only property. Dependency injection should handle this HTTP for me. And then this is where I get tripped up last time. It is, I need to get JSON async. Get JSON async actually comes from another library in Razor Components. So get JSON async, control period, comes from Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components. So I'm going to bring that namespace in there so we don't miss out on that. Now we're going to give it a path or a route. This is tricky. So what we need to do here is we need to give it the path. First of all, let me fix this. This is going to come back as a weather forecast. It is going to be an array of weather forecast. Oh, Carrie, thanks for the cheer. Appreciate that. Folks in the chat room, there was an issue on my stream setup where the cheers, the follows, all those good things would play extremely loud. I think I fixed that. Please let me know if that is not fixed. So if that cheer just came through your headphones and blew your head off, please let me know because I'd like to fix that. Let's see. Oh, I'm in the constructor and I'm doing too much work in here. I meant to do this somewhere else. So we have our HTTP. We need to go down here and use it. Sounds better? Awesome, Lauren. I had a lot of comments on the YouTube channel about the replays on that. So what had happened is when I installed them, I did it wrong. I didn't follow RTFM. Let's just say that. I didn't read the manual, and I installed them manually instead of using the setup file that they had. And in that setup file, they set custom volume options. Since I added it manually, it just maxed out the volume. And I think there was an update to something I was using that just caused it to go off the scales. I reinstalled everything. Now we're at a nice quiet level. So thanks for the feedback on that one, folks. That had to be really annoying. And I can't tell because I don't monitor the sounds while I'm trying to work the stream. So thanks, Gary. Let's see. Don't use Twitch. You figured it was normal. Oh, that's not good either. So we need to return. Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. There are other really good streamers. If you look down, there's a set of streamers on that list. Carrie's one of those streamers. Carrie's got a good show as well. So make sure you tune into them too. So I want to return this weather forecast service from HTTP. So I need to await because this is an async call. I also need to say async here. And I'm going to await HTTP get JSON async, which returns weather forecast as an array, and it gets it from a URL. And this is where I need to figure out something. URL or URI if you want to be a stickler. Where is that URI going to come from? Well, we have this open in our browser, and if we are on our Razor Components shell app, we can say HTTP weather, and it's not running, so it's going to throw an error. But this is the API path. It is on localhost. It is running on HTTPS, and that may cause some issues for us. We shall see. So this is the path we need to get that weather data. And that means our shell app needs to be running for us to get it. Now, like I said, I'm just doing this because it's easy. We could put this in its own API app, .NET, ASP.NET Web API project could be in this tree of projects, no problem. I'm just piggybacking off of the one we have, so we can run that app and grab the data from it. Have you test to use .NET Standard 2.1? Not sure what you mean, Janescu. I could probably use .NET 2.1 for the web API host if that's what you're saying. That would work fine as well. I'm just using the built-in Razor Components app for now. I need to, let's see, everything here should work. I need to register the service, so I haven't done that yet. So I need an I weather forecast service, and that is going to resolve a weather forecast service. Make sure I have my using statement in there, and I can remove that because it's got a using statement now. So that's looking good. Should be able to build the Blazor app. It should run just fine, or build just fine. We'll see what happens when I try to run it. So now I have to run, I'm going to run my Razor Components shell app. Control F5 is fine for this. Control F5. Come on, Control F5. I don't know what I was focused on. I Control F5'd some other app somewhere. Hopefully it wasn't something that broke something else. So we're hello from the server. We can do our forecast. That's fine. Nothing's really changed there. Let's make sure we can ping our weather. We have our weather. Codebase Alpha, welcome back to the show. Nice to see you again. Now we need to run our Blazor Shell app. So I can switch over here to Blazor Shell app and Control F5. And we're going to run both of these side by side because this one's hosting our data right now. So if we're on WebAssembly, if I click fetch data, I'm loading and failing. So there's a couple things this could be, and I know at least one of them so far. If we look at our errors, what this says, I'll zoom in so we can see. Localhost 5573 has been blocked because of a CORS policy. So we don't have cross-origin resource sharing enabled. So if I go back to my Razor Shell app and start up, under configure, I need to configure it to use cores. So I can say app dot, don't remember, but I use cores. There it is. Use cores. And then cores wants a policy. So we'll say use cores policy. We'll throw a lambda in here and just new up a policy. And that policy will be allow any origin. This probably isn't the safest method to add to your app, but we're just doing a experiment. We're always going to be on localhost. If this was something that you wanted to put into production instead of allow any origin, you would have a whitelist of places that you could hit this from. So there, what is HSTS? I think this has something to do with, what's it called? We'll just click on this and find out. HTTP security protocol. This is an opt-in security. There's probably some kind of cookie or something that it's setting. This is something I have to read more about. I'm not sure what exactly this is. Yeah, I'll have to check that out and see what it all is for. At least it has help right there in the link. So we've set our course policy to allow anybody that wants to access that API to go ahead and hit it. Tells it tells the browser your site's HTTPS. Yeah, so we also have this use HTTPS redirection, so it's only going to allow HTTPS calls, so it's probably something to do with that. I need to rebuild this app. Now that we've made that sweeping change, that's actually a pretty big change. So we'll swap that out, that course policy out, and rerun it. We can see the weather API is hit. We'll refresh our client-side app. And now we have fetch data from the client. So let's look at this again. We've got both these apps running. I'm going to put them side by side. If we go to the home, hello from WebAssembly, hello from the server. Okay. We don't need to look at the counter. Fetch data, though. Fetch data works from both. We didn't write any new code for fetch data, really. We just showed an interface where to go get it, right? So that's really cool. If we look at our application code, let's move these projects down and collapse them again. We have our core app that has 99% of our business logic in it. It has all of our pages. If we go under components, pages, fetch data, this is our fetch data component. It looks for an iWeather forecast service, and it doesn't care what that service is. It just decides, it just cares that you implement the fetch data interface or get forecast async. That has to be implemented by something somewhere. We resolve that through dependency injection at the shell level. So my Blazor app, when it sees that weather forecast interface, it says, go grab this weather forecast service that uses an HTTP client to get the data. When I'm on the server, that same page looks for that weather forecast service, and it gets the direct instance of weather forecast service that is solely responsible for creating the data. So it has immediate access to it directly from the source. This normally would be an abstraction level one thing more above an entity framework database. So rather than recreate all of entity framework and everything, that would take a pretty large amount of our time. Let's go ahead and look at a project that already has that implemented, see what it looks like, okay? So we're going to kind of take this concept one step further, but it's going to be I'm not going to write it all here on the show. You saw how we got here, so I think you guys kind of get the point of how we got to this situation. All right. I've got another Visual Studio instance I'm going to drag over. This is a much larger project. I'm going to collapse everything down so we can see it all right here. Let me do a little tab bankruptcy one last time. On this one, I have core. I didn't name everything app. Just I wanted to make sure I could tell which one of these I was in. Haywire 2. I got pulled away by work. Is this WebAssembly client calling forecast over HTTPS? Yeah. I don't mind pulling it back up for 1 second, and we'll look at it one last time before we jump over to the other project. They both work in the same manner, but yeah. We have our fetch data, which implements a weather forecast service. If we're on WebAssembly, weather forecast service just grabs HTTP client out of dependency injection and calls get JSON async and hits a API endpoint. And if we're on Razor components, weather forecast service is the thing that generates the weather forecasts. So there's no new code in the API controller. It just calls the same weather forecast service that we just looked at that generates the data. So it's just a nice abstraction that we can swap out whenever we go to a different model. And the reason I wanted to show this off, I get this question a lot, and people say, how can I build Razor components today that will be Blazor compatible tomorrow? And this is pretty much the idea, is I could create this Razor components app, have it in production, and decide I want to move to Blazor and just swap out the shell and a couple services, and it's good to go. Let's look at a more advanced solution here. This one I have Northwind. So everybody remembers this data from a database from the 90s. It's still out there. People still use it for demos. So that's where I got this from. If we look at my Solution Explorer, I'll zoom in. I have my Blazor Shell app. I have my Core Logic app. I have my Razor Components Shell app. And then I have my data access in shared. So what is under shared is this is just all of the models. Employees, orders, those things. Data access is nothing more than a DB context and some extension methods to help register the dependencies in the DI container. So we'll zoom out on that. And let's see, what did I just press here by accident? Navigating around with the keyboard, doing bad things. All right. So our core app, same as the other one. I have my components, I have my services. On this one, my services are not in the core app. My service is in the Northwind data access layer. So my data access has a, it's in shared. It's in my shared layer. I have an Northwind service that just simply says, get me all the employees asynchronous. I'm going to implement that interface on the Blazor and the Razor Components app. So if I open my Blazor app under services, I have a Northwind service. This one has HTTP client, and it calls out to get JSON async and gets back a list of employees from the API controller. If we look at the Razor Components implementation of it, it's a little bit different. I have my employees controller. My employees controller injects a Northwind service, and it calls to the Northwind service and says, get all employees async. So if I look under my services, I have a Northwind service. And my Northwind service takes a DB context and the get all employees async calls db context employees, and there's this mapping select query that pulls the employees out and returns new employees, and I'm taking off these navigation properties. I kind of alluded to why I did this earlier. If you just joined the show, I'll explain in a moment why I didn't just do this and say, because I should essentially be able to, it's going to comment everything. I should essentially be able to do this instead and say return to list async. Or I can do to array, to list. Actually, it's just, I gotta satisfy the correct signature here. So I need to do to list async. I should be able to do it just like that. I ended up having to do this because of a current bug that is in ASP.NET Core 3.0. So I had to do a select, pull the employees out individually, map them back to an employee object minus their navigation properties, and then call to list async. So the service in this scenario, dogs are barking, it is spring break. The services in this scenario are being wrapped around different things. So we have the controller has a get, and that injects the service and calls the service directly. Because we're using this service layer, we can access it from Blazor, and then when we're on the Razor Components app, we can access the service directly, and then the service just wraps around Entity Framework. So all good stuff, nice abstractions where we can just swap things out as needed using dependency injection. So let's give this a run. I've got to run my Blazor Shell first, because just like the last app, I used the Razor Components app as a web API host. So I need to do Razor Shell. Control F5 is fine. Don't need debugging. Go ahead and pop this guy into a window. You will notice too that this version is using the Telerik UI components, so things might look a little different. And I was experimenting with some things, so that is an issue right now. The menu going away is an experiment I'm working with, so you can ignore that for now. There is a prototype component in use here that's not quite working the way it's supposed to. So here's my weather forecast data in a Telerik grid for Blazor. This is my Razor Components app. Now if I switch to my Blazor Shell app, Control F5, this is going to pull data from the same Northwind database. And I have the same prototype component. This is all shared logic here. So that's going to disappear by accident. I'll explain what that is in a few minutes. So this is pulling from DB context. This is pulling from a web API endpoint that is pulling from the same DB context. So we have identical app behavior with just swapping an interface out. Very cool stuff. Steve's got some demos. Steve Sanderson's got some demos where he's experimented with this concept in PWAs and Electron, and you can kind of swap these shells out as you want. So I'd like to add some of those to this as well. Having an Electron version of this would be really cool too. So let me explain some bugs real quick that have nothing to do with the concept that we're working with and everything to do with just the experiment that I was doing. This is a menu idea that I was working with for a Telerik component. I am just reusing, we have this nice pop-up component, and I was trying to see how far I could push the pop-up component. So I was trying to see if I could use it as a responsive menu. So that was what was happening where it was disappearing. Is I just have a bug where it closes when it's not supposed to. So it's just this nice flyout menu effect, and it's still not ready. It's just something I was experimenting with. So that's where that was disappearing. So that explains the bug that you saw. Again, nothing to do with the hosting model, just a personal experiment going awry. But it's still a pretty cool little effect that I like. Hopefully I can keep working on that and make it something that's reusable. Yeah, this is using the base Telerik theme. Is that tempting or theming? I can't tell, Janescu, what you meant there. Lauren, you've been working on a similar menu idea. This one is actually using a modal pop-up that we have. The issue that I'm running into is it's not aware of the screen's context. There's no way to get a screen size from C#. Excuse me, my voice is going. There's no way to get the screen size. So when I click home and I navigate, this works well. It can't tell when I'm full screen though, so it doesn't show the menu always, and if I click things, it disappears. So I've got some work to do to fix that. So yeah, mine's all, I don't have any JavaScript or anything in here, so it's just, it doesn't know when it's full screen and when it's not, to disallow that menu to be hidden on full screen. So something I need to work through. It's just something I was tinkering with for a couple minutes yesterday and kind of looked cool. Let me get into this other bug. So, wrong app. One more bug. I want to show you guys this so you don't get hung up on it if you mess around with... and this is not a Razor Components thing. This is an ASP.NET Core thing. I'm going to pull these navigation values back in and just save this. I'm going to build and rerun this app. And watch this error I get on fetch data. Oh, really? It's not going to do it. Oh, wait, no, it's not on fetch data. It is on API values. When I hit the API, this is Blazor. Wrong app. I need to be in Razor Components. When I hit the API endpoint, media queries work to some extent, Goran. The problem is media queries cannot toggle things from being from triggering events. And when I click an item from my menu, it triggers an event to hide the menu for when it's on a mobile device. I can't toggle that behavior. So that's where I'm getting that kind of niche bug from. If I say API values, unhandled exception occurred processing the request. Synchronous operations disallowed. Call, write async, blah, blah, blah. I had to look this up. I had never seen this in my life. So if you do search for this, what you end up with is a GitHub issue on ASP.NET Core 2.2. Let's see, there's another one. That's not the one I wanted. This is the one, I think. Here we are. ASP.NET Core. Newtonsoft JSON fails async flush. Yeah. So there was something in 3.0 they changed. That's, I don't quite understand what the scenario is. I guess it's in 2.2. I'd assumed 3.0. You have to configure IS to allow synchronous IO. Even when you do that, I'm still getting the error, and it's pretty random when it doesn't. So hopefully they fix this. It was just a major pain. Getting rid of the navigation properties resolved that. So it has something to do with it's an async task, so it's asynchronous. So I don't quite understand what the synchronous, the error says is it's trying to do something synchronous. Synchronous operations are disallowed. So when I'm doing this this async, these navigation properties must be triggering something synchronous to happen. And do you need Newtonsoft? In future versions of ASP.NET Core, it will not be the default. So I'm assuming maybe it has something to do with that. Personally, I didn't set it up this way. I was just using the framework as is. So I'm sure you could swap that out. I don't know if that would make the issue go away or not, but what I assume is happening is when Entity Framework tries to access these properties, and serialize them through Newtonsoft, is doing something synchronous, which tells it that it's a synchronous task in an asynchronous state, and it throws that error. It's very annoying. This is a new thing. Never had that problem before, so I don't know what they changed. It's in this long post. It explains things. I didn't have time to read through it. I just hope they fix it. Getting rid of the nav properties works. Normally, I don't do this type of thing anyway. To be very honest, I very rarely hit my DB context directly like this and just return employees. Usually what is happening is I am doing a DB context employees select or automapper, and I do a mapping to something that is flat and send that down the pipeline, because I don't like things having direct access to DB context. So I normally wouldn't hit this anyway, but now that I have, it's just a roadblock that I had to get past. And that's the way I did it. Normally, I'd probably have some type of data transfer object or some type of model that this would go to anyhow. Because really, you don't do this sort of thing, I hope, too often. Anyway, get off my soapbox on that one. There's probably apps that are out there doing that, and they work fine. So I think that about wraps things up for today. Piping? Pipelining? When I write these things, I usually do a pipeline like this. It will be employees, and then I'll have select, and that will map to something. This will be like some type of view model, and then that might pipe out to something else, and I'll have a chain of dot something dot something dot something. It might have AutoMapper doing some mapping, something like that, but there will be a data pipeline. So pipeline programming, a functional programming style of writing these queries out. I actually have a talk on that, Goran, if you're interested in seeing how far you can take pipeline programming with any framework. It's really cool stuff. I'll pop it in the chat room. I think it'll be something you might enjoy. Let's see, what is that called? It is called extending expressions. Extending expressions. Here we go. This is a YouTube video of my talk. Yes, exactly like what I did with the web form thing the other day. This is a talk about how to do pipeline programming in Entity Framework. So it has some really cool tips in there, and talks about expression trees and gets really deep into metaprogramming. So give that a look. Might be something you get some use out of. It's one of my favorite talks to give. I actually recorded it for Channel 9, and there was a issue with the recording equipment, and the whole session got lost, and I haven't been back out to Channel 9 to redo that session. So that's the best YouTube video I have of it right now. Yeah, Janescu, there's something that they changed with that's making it kind of error out. So anyhow, let's get back to closing up the show. We got to wrap things up here. It's about 2 hours in. We saw how to kind of shell out some Blazor apps, which is a really cool concept that I like, and I think I'll use on some more demos later on. I'm getting some more ideas around this. And again, this is something that Steve Sanderson showed off before. This isn't something I just came up with overnight. He had some cool Electron apps that were built this way that I'd love. GitHub. I don't have a command for GitHub in there. I'm assuming that is a common thing. So I need to add that. If you're looking for this application, you will need the here you go, Skull Crusher. You do need the Northwind database on your machine to run that. If you don't want to run it, you just want to look at it, you can grab the source code there. I need to put that command, that GitHub command out there. We do have some commands. Roadmap is a new bot command. So if you want to see the Blazor roadmap, there it is. Let's see what else I have out there as far as commands. Don't remember. I got to set some more of these up. I just got the new chatbot up and running. So Streamlabs is my chatbot. They just introduced a new cloud-based chatbot that's pretty cool. A lot of streamers build their own chatbot as part of their stream. And I didn't want to reinvent the wheel and steal everybody's idea and build chatbots every week. I know Jeff Fritz has a good one, and I think Dev Chatter has a good chatbot as well that they've built live on the show. Yeah, so I have a few things out there. I'll put the GitHub one out there. Yeah, that's another one. I expected that to work, Skull Crusher commands and help, but I didn't see that those did anything. So I have to figure out what the actual... I'm still learning this chatbot. So this does work. If you want to grab the latest bits of Telerik UI for Blazor, that's the link there. You can say @Telerik or bang Telerik. We also have font. This is a question I get a lot. When I'm in my editor and I do things like Lambda expressions, you see these nice little ligatures. If you want those, you can grab the font by saying bang font. And there is the font that I use in Visual Studio. So I'll get some more commands for the chat room. I like the GitHub one. I'll go ahead and make sure that one is in there. So GitHub is one I need to add. Just taking a quick note here, which should just resolve to my GitHub page. Let's see if that was that easy. You hate ligatures? Come on, man. Come on. You can't hate ligatures. Ligatures are amazing because we can do awesome stuff like, especially in that terrible language called JavaScript. No, I'm just kidding, guys. It's not terrible. It is terrible, but it's not terrible. You can say equals, double equals, triple equals, and you get these nice ligatures for that. You can say not triple equals or not equals. Those are nice. Greater than, or is it less than or equal to? Less than or equal to. That's less than or equal to. Equal to. Yeah, you get the point. There's lots of really cool ligatures that are very good for reading code that I use all the time. So I just added the GitHub. GitHub, boom, there we go. So I added that to the chatbot. We'll go ahead and save that guy. Close up Visual Studio. Let's just have a couple last few announcements. I'm a little behind on my show notes. Yeah, exactly, Gordon. No, we still need it for interops. We can't say that. So you can go to edcharbonneau.com. A little behind on my show notes, but I promise I'll get these up here soon. I got 2 weeks worth to put up there. edcharbonneau.com for those. If you go to, if you just search for Visual Studio Launch Party, you'll find a link to the Visual Studio Launch event. It starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time. There are several speakers starting from 9. There's a keynote all the way through 4 o'clock when the virtual attendee party starts. I will be on channel 9 for the virtual attendee party. That starts at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or Pacific, whatever daylight savings time thing we're on now. 4 o'clock Pacific time. Starts at 4 o'clock. I will be on there. They're going to do some Q&A about Blazor and Razor components and how to use it with Visual Studio. Make sure you guys tune in at least sometime during the day, especially during the attendee party when I'll be on, and there'll be a lot of other cool people being interviewed from the community during the attendee party. So check that out. Put that on your calendars. There's also some local events that are hosting it as well. If you're in the Louisville area, my meetup group is hosting the event. So you can watch with some people that have similar interests and go to a meetup event, have some food and drink and whatnot while you watch the show. There will be a show next week on Friday as well, and then after that, hopefully I will be able to do more shows during the week. I'll also be at Codestock. If any of you are from the Tennessee area or you're heading to Codestock, I will be at Codestock. I don't have a session. Unfortunately, I couldn't submit for Codestock because of reasons, but I am there as a sponsor. Oh, shoot. I just lost power. I just completely lost power. And it is back, but my windows are bouncing everywhere, so give me a sec to gather my marbles. Wow, that was fun. So it looks like the stream didn't cut out. I did lose power to my desktop, which caused... thankfully, I'm on a laptop, so that didn't cause anything to go out. But I did lose... Oh, our Dallas's rating with a party of 11. You guys are catching the end of the show, unfortunately. But thank you for joining anyway. You just witnessed my power go out at the exact same time. I'm on a laptop, so it has a battery internal. So it saved me from completely losing the stream and cutting out. So anyway, the Visual Studio launch party, thanks for putting that in chat, Skull Crusher. We've got that. Let's see, that I think wraps up. Make sure you watch that Visual Studio launch party. There's going to be some announcements that you guys are going to want to catch. Yeah, it was just to my desk. Something under the desk must have gotten disconnected. Yeah, there's going to be announcements at the Visual Studio launch party. Make sure you catch those. Trying to think if there's anything else. I'll be building... See, saying I'm going to be at Codestock. I'll also be at Stir Trek later this month, the 26th. I do have a session at Stir Trek. I will be talking about WebAssembly. If you're in the Ohio area, Stir Trek is an amazing event. I believe it is completely sold out, though. So if you don't have a ticket, unfortunately, you cannot join us. If you do have a ticket, I will see you there. I have a session in at Build. I will be building the project for during the show over the next few months. Hopefully I'll be able to start that in April. So the next show will possibly revolve around that Blazor or the Razor Components app that I'm building for some sessions that I'll be giving this year. So with that said, I will let you guys have your weekend. It is already 2 in the afternoon for me. So thanks again, everybody, for joining me on the show. Is there an official hashtag for the launch party worth adding to TweetDeck? Yes, there is. So let's see, that Visual Studio. Let's see, Visual Studio launch. There is a hashtag. I should know this. Hashtag code party is one of those hashtags. So there is a Visual Studio, or sorry, there is a Twitch channel called Code Party. If you look for the Twitch channel called Code Party, there's a hashtag for that as well. There's also another hashtag for the launch. I don't see it on the page here, but I know there is one. It was emailed to me, and I should know it. If you follow me on Twitter, I will tweet it out when I find it. So my Twitter is exactly the same as my Twitch channel handle. So I will see you guys April 2nd from the launch party. And you guys have a excellent weekend. And hope to see you back here next week as well. Have a good one.